Hi there, and welcome to Position 1 Power Equipment. My name's Adrian, and today we're going to look at the P6220 Chainsaw. So let's open the box and lay the contents out on the table. So I've laid the box contents out on the table for you to see. First of all, we have the chainsaw motor unit itself. We have a 2-stroke mixing bottle. Now it's very important to get the correct mixture. We shall go through that later. We have the user manual. Again, very important that you read through the user manual before using your chainsaw. We have the chain bar with its protective sheath. We have 2 heavy-duty 20-inch saw chains. And we also have the storage bag to keep your chainsaw safe when you're not using it. Further to this, we have a small toolkit here. In the toolkit, there's a little bit of assembly to be done. We should go through that, but there are 2 small screws. Be very careful not to lose the 2 small screws. Okay, and that's the contents of your packaging. So for the first stage of assembly, you will need to remove some tools from the toolkit. You'll need the 4mm Allen key, the small socket with the screwdriver handle, the 2 small screws, and this here, this little metal plate, which is called the bumper spike. Have a look in your manual for these items. So a little bit of disassembly needed. This is the brake and clutch cover, and you will see the 2 bolts here. And this is the brake. Now typically the brake is in the on position. To remove this cover, we need to switch the brake off by pushing it back towards the operating handle. That would be the brake off, that would be the brake on. So we'll turn the brake off, then we undo the 2 nuts, just need to loosen them at this stage, and we can remove the 2 nuts, taking care not to lose them when you remove them. And the brake and clutch cover will simply pull away. We can put this to one side for the moment. Having removed the brake and clutch cover, you will see 2 small tapped holes in the front of the engine. This is where the bump spike goes. You'll see an elongated hole. This goes towards the bottom of the chainsaw, and a more circular hole towards the top. And simply by hand, screw in the 2 small Allen bolts. We just get them started by hand, one at a time. We'll put the first one in and start the second one, and then we'll tighten up the 2 screws. So having fitted the screws loosely, I can now tighten them up with the Allen key. They do need to be tight, but not so tight as you're going to strip the threads. So yeah, just a reasonable force with the long handle of the Allen key. And that's the bump spike fitted. So as you can see, I'm wearing protective gloves for this because the chain by its very nature is sharp. It's designed for cutting, and it will cut your skin if you get snagged on it. So I'm wearing the gloves. Okay, now it is possible to put the chain on the wrong way. If I flip the chain over this way, that would be incorrect. This way is correct, and the way you can tell is that facing forward at the top of the chain you will see the small part of the cutting link and then the large part at the rear. So the small part at the front, large part at the rear on what will be the top of the chain. Okay, there is a little diagram on the bar which shows you to confirm this, and I'll show you that shortly. So the first thing to do is to fit the chain around the clutch and onto the sprocket beneath. Then I can simply lie the chain out in this position, ready to accept the chain bar. So let's move on to fitting the chain bar. Again, this can be fitted backwards. If I put it on this way round, the logo will be upside down when the chain is stood on the floor. If I put it this way, the logo will be the right way up, and that is the way we need to fit the chain bar. So with the long slot over the 2 studs, we can tuck the chain bar underneath the rotating clutch here, and place the chain bar back against the sprocket in this position. Next we'll move on to fitting the chain to the chain bar. So still wearing my gloves, I simply loop the chain onto the end of the chain bar, placing the chain into the grooves on the side of the chain bar all the way along its length. Still wearing my gloves, as you can see, and then when I get to the very bottom, and it's in the grooves all the way along, not quite there, there we go, I'll just pull the chain bar back away from the chainsaw loosely, so that the chain is sat there and it's all quite stable. So the next part is to refit the outer cover, which has the brake and the chain adjuster. Now you'll notice the chain adjuster has a pin here, which is adjusted back and forth in this slot by this screw at the front. Now it's important that when you assemble this onto its two pins here, that this pin drops into this elongated hole in the chain bar. So I'll place it in position. Before I put any nuts on, I'll just check by having a quick look underneath that that pin has dropped in through the hole, and it has on this occasion. So as you can see, this pin here drops into this hole, and it actually does. If you find it's out of a line, just use the adjusting screw to adjust it into the rough position where you need it. Okay, so let's just loosely refit the two nuts back on again. It's a bit tricky with gloves on, I know. You just take that one glove off. I'm not handling the chain with it. There we are. So just finger tight for the time being. Now what we're going to do is to pull the chain bar up, away in this direction, up here, and pull it out. Okay, so I'm just going to tighten these up, finger tight, while holding this up and the bar out, and we have a rough adjustment. So what I'll do now is just rotate this screw clockwise, and I'll feel the little tensioning pin taking hold of the bar. So I'll just give it a turn, hold the bar up in this direction, and just feel the tension of the chain. Okay, I'm just going to put a little bit of nip on these bolts. As I say, nothing to speak of. I'm just doing it with my hand, so there's no load on them. I'll just give it another half a turn. Okay, now if I'm pulling on that chain, I can pull it right out of the chain guide. Yeah, so it's still a little bit slack. Another half a turn. Just comes out. I'll go another quarter turn, and I can pull the chain just out of the slot, but I can feel tension on it. I'll just check that everything's free moving, which it is. And I'll tighten up the two nuts. That's the two nuts securely tightened. Recheck the movement of the chain. Okay, I can spring the chain out of the groove just, and now that chain is in its first position, ready to use. Now, during use, this chain will stretch quite considerably during the first few minutes and hours of use. So you will, with a new chain, have to adjust it on a regular basis when you first get the saw. This will become slack quite quickly as the chain stretches during its initial use. It will get to a point where it won't stretch anymore, and then the adjustment won't have to be done so often. So that's fitting the bar and chain. But as I say, you will need to go through this adjustment process by loosening the two nuts, tightening up on the tensioner. Just highlight the tensioner. The tensioner is here. Clockwise to tighten the chain, anti-clockwise to loosen it. And before I do anything, I've just put the brake back on, and that stops any movement of the chain. Just a final little fail-safe. As you can see, the symbol here on the chain bar shows the cutting link in this orientation, and as you can see, that's how I've got the cutting link. So one final process, I'll just put the guard on so that I don't cut myself while I'm fueling and oiling the chainsaw. So the fuel filler is here on the left hand side of the engine, And as you can see, it says use fresh unleaded petrol mixed with 25:1 with semi-synthetic 2-stroke oil. So your machine does come with a graduated mixing bottle, and there are various different scales and mixture rates on the bottle. The one we're interested in is the 25:1. Now I've just highlighted this with a little Sharpie to pick it out because it doesn't show very well on camera. So we're going to fill up the bottle up to the lower line here, which is 576.92 millilitres, with fresh unleaded petrol. And we need to be very accurate on this, get it exactly to the line. Put the bottle on a nice level surface and top it up gradually with fresh unleaded petrol. If you put a little bit too much in, you can always tip it out at this stage back into the original container. So once you've filled it to this line, then top it up with your semi-synthetic 2-stroke oil up to the top line. Now, the 2-stroke oil, if you put a little bit too much in, it's not a worry. I'd rather you put a little bit too much in than a little bit too little. So yeah, err on the side of more rather than less. The worst thing that can happen is your engine will be a little bit too smoky for that period of use on that fuel that you pour in. But yes, definitely don't go underneath the line. Don't overfill the fuel above the line, and don't underfill the 2-stroke oil below the line. So yeah, be quite fussy with this and get it as close to the lines as you possibly can. Next, we can remove the filler cap and top up with our mixtured fuel. Probably best not to overfill the tank. You don't want it running everywhere all over your nice new chainsaw. And once you're done, replace the filler cap and screw it down firmly. So we're fueled up, we're all prepared. The next thing we need to do is add chain oil. So on the front here is the chain lubricating oil reservoir, and you put chain lubricating oil in here, again taking care not to overfill it. Once you're done, replace the filler cap and again screw it down firmly. Just to go through some of the controls on the chainsaw, you have the red switch here, which is the on-off switch. Down would be off, up would be on. You need it in this position to start the chainsaw, and to switch the engine off when you finish with it, push it down to the O position to switch the engine off. Here we have the choke lever. For a cold start, you need to pull it out until it clicks. When you're starting the engine, to switch the choke off, it will switch off automatically like that when you pull the trigger. Here we have the primer bulb for the carburetor. On first start of the engine, you'll need to push this 5 or 6 times until the primer bulb fills with the 2-stroke fuel. And here on the left hand side of the engine, you will see the recoil starter itself. And those are the controls. For a cold start, press the primer several times until you can see that the bulb is full of fuel. 7 times is normally enough. You would pull out the choke lever, switch the engine switch here to the on position, and pull the engine over. If the engine starts, you can pull the trigger and start to use the motor. If the engine attempts to start, so you've got the choke on and it's attempted to start, pull the throttle to switch the choke off and then pull start the engine. For a hot start, no need to use the choke. You've already primed the primer. Just set the engine switch to the on position and pull the engine over to start as normal. It's quite usual for it to take a few seconds after a cold start before the engine will settle down, as it were. So just rev it gently for a minute or so, and then you'll find it'll work efficiently. And that's a hot and cold start on your chainsaw. Thank you for purchasing your P1 Power Equipment product. For more information on this or any of our other products, visit www.p1pe.co.uk. I do hope you found this demonstration useful. I've been Adrian, and thank you for watching.